Okay, Subra, you wanted to share something you discovered in your check-in.
Yeah, so I think along with me there were like 4 other people. I can remember Dirk, Carolina, and everyone is sort of navigating through complexity in their own lives. And this is something that brings all of us here in their own lives. When I say their own work and their own personal lives, everybody is in a juncture, and these are the complex parts in their lives, and that is what is a big motivation which drives them into this meetup. That is what I discovered.
Okay, thank you very much. Something from other groups? What did you discover in the check-in?
That we're basically from very different parts of the world and doing quite different things. So we had someone who was a UX professional, somebody working for the federal government in the United States. But basically we all have, and we have other interests, but basically we still share the same eagerness to know more about systems innovation. So that was a nice experience.
Okay, great. Yeah, I already saw that so many people from different parts of the world are here. So that's very interesting and nice. Anyone else would like to share something that you observed during your check-in?
Yeah, we have, my name is Jere Lubbers from World of Minds. We're with a team here, and we're in a group with Justin, who's busy in a project working on the recycling of plastics, also using 3D printing and education for children. And we as World of Minds, we did a project in the recycling of solar panels, setting up a knowledge network. So we offered the learning log book and the visualization of all the learnings in form of system map to Justin. And then also Bjarke from Denmark wanted to share that knowledge. He's working in getting cities carbon neutral, organizing citizens engagement, and went together, tried to solve these complex climate issues, not by jumping to solutions, but also by educating. And please correct me, Bjarke, if I'm wrong. Jasmine is organizing the learning programs of the hub, and the London hub, from the London hub. Arcia is going to publish a new book in 2 months about the metaverse. It's going to be really interesting, looking into identities. And Jasmine is a community developer, and yeah, we all like to learn from each other and meet like-minded people.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe you can put the title of the book in the chat, so that people who are interested can.
I will do. It is in Dutch, so for the moment, maybe there comes a translation, but I'm not that far. But I will send
the
title.
Thank you. From other groups,
within my group.
Yes, what did you observe, Adiposi?
Yeah, within my group, I would say that there was a great fascination with understanding complexity, but as well, there was probably an equal fascination with embracing, the mystery of the unknown, unconceptualized. So, and I heard this, from, Nina, who was in the group, and also I shared that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The mystery of the unknown, embracing it instead of being afraid of it, embracing it. Yeah. Anyone else want to share what happened in your group, what you observed in your group?
We had a group with a lot of diversity in terms of backgrounds. But one interesting commonality among some of the members of the group was their country. They were all from Germany, and 3 out of 5. So that raised the question of which countries are embracing systems thinking more than others, and which fields. We thought it was just a coincidence that we had more Germans than any other country represented in this small group. But on the other hand, the conversation led us to think about how in each particular place, we are using systems thinking to help us advance in different fields.
Okay, thank you. Interesting questions, and I hope that after this session today, there is a bit more answer to that. Although the question that you raised about answers, if it's in some places more embraced than in other countries, it's difficult to say from this group. But it's an interesting question. Yeah, Laura, you also raised your hand. You wanted to share something?
Yeah, in our group we also had pretty interesting topics. One was, for example, health and then community work, but also education, school development. We've been talking about this necessity to approach the people who are not into systems thinking, because yeah, it's not only about making this research, these findings in the complexity, but it's also important to involve the people, to involve the stakeholders, and to communicate with them. Yeah.
And how can you make people aware that they're part of a system and that they should be involved? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Jean, you raised your hand. You'd like to say something? It's the last one before we continue.
Oh, I should unmute myself first, right?
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Yeah.
I'd like to offer a thought to ponder, and that is, regardless of the label that you put on it, we are all in the same quest, which is to understand relationships and their implications. From my perspective, there is nothing more.
Okay. Thank you. So that's what we have in common. In the diversity, it's good to search for commonalities. I think that's one of the things that in the Navigator you will find back. So yeah, we already heard the word systems, and I think the ones who are here, they understand what a system is and why systems change is something that we all feel very passionate about, and also that it's necessary in working in complexity and working in complex challenges. And the word complexity, and those two words are mentioned. So what is complexity? What does it mean to you, complexity? Let's have a kind of common understanding. I see applause what complexity means to you. So you're kind of, yeah, great. Or
maybe I can share a bit of like a short summary about the discussion we have with a friend about this. Because in my mind, complexity was more about to have many variables. But it was interesting that at the end of our discussions, we realized maybe it's not about the amount of elements of a system, or let's say it's not about the amount of variables, but it gets complex when these elements are not connected or are not visible. Like you don't understand what is the relationship between this and this. So something can be complex when they have just 4 elements, and could be more complex that have 50,000 or so that are well connected, and that you understand the flows between it. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay. So it's not about the number of elements, but more the connections that you have between the different parts. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mark, you raised your hand. Complexity, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, thank you, Monique. So complexity for me is when there is emergence. So when there is something happening that you cannot really explain by looking at the individual parts.
Yeah. Okay. So emergence, something is happening. You have to just look at the whole thing and not at individual parts. Jean, you had your hand up.
Yeah, to Carolina's point, that seems consistent with perspective on complexity that I've been comfortable with for a long time, which came from Csikszentmihalyi in The Evolving Self, where something which is complex is well differentiated and well integrated at the same time. And the example that he used was a movie camera. If you have a movie camera that has a huge number of features and functions, but is not well integrated, then it becomes complicated. But if it doesn't have a lot of features and functions, it's mundane. And complexity is highly differentiated and highly integrated, so that complexity is the thing that survives over time.
Okay, thank you. Subra Enemani, and then I'd like to continue. What does complexity mean to you, Subra?
Yeah, things that we know that we can't control. So it can be a big thing like an organization, or it can be a small thing like happiness. For example, we don't know happiness is like serotonin or whatever hormones in what ratio. So yeah, things that we know that we can't control.
Okay. Yeah, things we know we can't control. And Emma?
I think complexity having different parts connected or related to each other to become complex from complex, I think.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so let me share a bit because yeah, complexity we can talk endlessly about it. But for now, I would like to just share a bit of our vision on complexity. And let me just share my screen. So, very briefly, and I think it's also mentioned by you, there are many actors and factors that interact with each other and their environment in multiple ways. There's no clear connection between cause and effective. So there is a level of unpredictability and uncertainty. And I think that's also maybe related to the emergence that you mentioned. You don't know what will happen, what the result will be, but a new situation will emerge. And we don't know exactly how that evolves, but it's new. So examples, you mentioned happiness as an example, but also immigration patterns, armed conflicts, natural disasters, epidemics, family relations, and the human body are complex systems. And often what you see happening is, and I heard also the word control, what we can't control is complex. But what you also see happening in the world nowadays is that when it's complex, the tendency is to start to control it. Look at the COVID pandemic. The first reflex is we want to control a pandemic instead of embrace it as a complex situation where you need a whole system to approach it. And instead of trying to control it and to, to address it with ways of thinking and that are not fit to complexity. And so what we see happening a lot is that there is a bit of a mix-up between complicated and complex in the way we address it. And complicated situations are situations, as you see left, where you can do an analysis. You can find a cause, and there might be more ways to fix it, and you need experts to fix it. And so the construction of a plane, or when something breaks down, that's a car breaks down, that's a complicated situation, and it needs a certain approach. It needs an approach of analysis, you bring in experts, and there are solutions. But complex is something totally different. And what you see happening is that complex situations are approached as if it is complicated. We will do an analysis, we will bring in experts and ask them to solve it. While in complex situations, you need a different approach. And it's already mentioned, but you need to address who are involved, which are the parties that are involved, which are the elements that are involved, and how can we bring them together? How can we bring that system together and raise the awareness that you can only change or address the complex issue if you move as a system. Yeah, so that was kind of, and I can refer to a framework that we use. It's the Kneffin framework, which really explains very clearly the difference between complex and complicated, but also too simple and chaotic situations, and what is necessary. But for today, we zoom in on complexity. So there comes our navigator. As I said, we are a group of consultants who embrace complexity, who are intrigued by it. And through our work, and of course through a lot of literature and experience and practices of ourselves, we have identified elements that are important if you are dealing with complexity and systems change. So what do you need to consider? And based on our own experience, and this took us 2 years to develop this, we have been using different methodologies, approaches, and then we had a process of 2 years where we said, what if we are dealing with complex issues, what are the things we need to consider? What is important? And this is the result. We built this Complexity Navigator where we have 9 building blocks, and it is really helpful to identify, to look at the situation you're in, look at the building blocks and say, hey, what are the building blocks at this moment? What are the elements that we need to focus on in order to address this challenge? And some things might be in place and some things really are overseen. So this is a kind of attempt to embrace complexity, to work with complexity, and change systems, work for system transformation and system change. So what I would like to do is to go through the different building blocks with you very briefly. Then we will, then you can ask some questions, and then we will work with it. So you can, again, in small groups, you are allowed to look at a situation that you're facing and see what is the building block that needs attention right now. And of course, all the building blocks are important. There's no sequence in it, but it might be that one is overlooked, or that you get stuck and you think, why do I get stuck? And it might be because you are overlooking one of the building blocks. So let's look at our Complexity Navigator, because this is also an exercise that we often do with clients when they approach us and they want us to help them in a certain situation. And we first kind of guide them through these building blocks to identify what is needed at this moment in your process or in your issue. So it's a tool that we use with clients, but also among ourselves when we discuss situations. So let me go to the first building block. And the first building block is the urgency for change. And the saying here is, people do not change because they see the light, but because they feel the heat. So who feels the heat? And if no one feels the heat, then the tendency to change or the willingness to really change is probably not that big. So I had a situation where I was working with a whole sector in Kenya. It was the macadamia sector. And it was identified by a group of experts that the macadamia sector has potential. Macadamia is nuts, by the way, these big nuts. And it was identified that that sector had potential to really grow and be more competitive in the world markets and in exports to Europe. And so that was identified by experts. And then we realized when we brought the people together, and we did the system mapping, so we mapped the different, who has a stake, who are part of this sector. And we identified that there was a steering group, but nothing really happened. So there were meetings and meetings, and they were kind of waiting for experts to say what they had to do, to really pull them. And then what we did is the opposite. As consultants, we totally withdrew ourselves from the process and to see what happened. And the interesting thing was that they then realized, okay, we have to do it ourselves. So the whole drive and the urgency for change shifted from the expert vision to the sector themselves. There were players in the sector who started to really realize that if we don't do anything, we will lose our competitive position. So the urgency for change was really felt, and then things moved very slowly and very quickly, and we could continue with the process. So we really had a pause, because we thought the urgency for change at this moment is what needs attention. And we can plan and we can do workshops and we can do everything, but if the urgency for change is not there, it's a waste of money and it's a waste of time. So that's why we really focused on that building block, urgency for change. So that's the first one. The second one, and it's not in a sequence, but it is just the building blocks that I mention here. It's if you want to build a ship together, make people long for the endless sea. So don't make plans and say, we are going to build a ship and this is the drawing and you need to do this and you need to do that. No, there needs to be a longing for a situation. And if the longing is there, then the people can decide themselves how they will divide the tasks or divide the work. But you have to have a shared ambition, which is very explicit and clear for everyone involved. So it's a joint approach to what you want, and it's a joint approach to how you would like to move ahead. So this is about finding people's passion, finding their energy. What do they actually want to achieve? Another building block. And by the way, we have related to all these building blocks, we have certain methodologies that we use that are very helpful if you are addressing this particular element. Responsive leaders. It's not about walking ahead, but it's about where do people move and how can I lead them from where they are going. It's not walking ahead, but it's walking in the middle, being in the middle and sensing where the system is moving towards, and then lead that. And it can be different people in different stages of the process, but you need drivers. You need or a champion or an initiator. And in the example that I mentioned for the macadamia sector in Kenya, we at one point, we had someone from the Ministry of Agriculture who took that role. And that was also part of our process, that we were waiting for someone to really drive it with a certain authority, which would be really appealing and accepted as leader in a process. So in every process that we do, we look at what are responsive leaders. Is there leadership? And if not, how can we find it? How can we shape it? How can we address this leadership issue? Involvement of all. I think that was also mentioned by one of you. How do you involve everyone? Because we need the different perspectives, and our name is Perspectivity, because that's what we really are focusing on. We need the different perspectives in order to see the whole picture. And how do you do that? So often what you see is there is an initiative and certain people are involved or certain parties are involved. There is a system mapping happening, and then And then you have to make sure you get all the people, all the stakeholders on board, which is not easy. And it needs attention. So I can give another example. We were working on a nature inclusive agenda of the Netherlands. And what you see happening if you do the system mapping and invite people, that the believers, they will come. The ones who feel the sense of urgency, the ones who want change, the ones who are, you know, the activists and the climate, they were all there. But the voice that we were missing were the people who are denying the climate change, or the people who are not aware of it or don't want to see it. Those people were not there. So that was a building block that we, from the beginning in the process, really had to pay attention to, because we knew that if we go into this process and you don't have this other voice, the against voice in your process, then you will miss a very crucial element if you want to change the system. So that building block took a lot of time and energy, and it was nearly not possible to get the against voice in the room. So we found another way to do it. You can do it in different ways. You can or bring it in as information or a film, or we had empty chairs with the absent voice, and every group had to work with this absent voice. Every time we had an assignment, we said, okay, bring in that perspective, because we couldn't get the people in, but the voice was definitely there. So that was a building block that that at that moment needed attention. And what also here is important, that we not only look at people who agree with each other, like we are now all here, we're all aware of system change and system innovation, but here it's like, okay, but what is the voice that is triggering us, that is challenging us, that says no? And how can we bring in the no, the different voice? How can we bring that into our process? And that's why that's what this building block is about, so that we don't have it's not about getting smooth agreement. If you get smooth agreement, you can be thinking, okay, do we have then all the voices in the room? Because we need a bit of friction, we need to be challenged. So that's what this building block is about. Reinforcing actions. So if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's an African saying. And it's about, if you start taking actions, how can you make sure that you align your actions, that you create synergy in the actions, and that it are not isolated initiatives. So it's about strengthening each other and reinforcing each other. Let me go to the next one. This is about adaptive learning. As we know, in complexity and systems change, we don't know exactly, we cannot look far ahead. We don't make plans for a year. We have this kind of iterative learning. We have smaller prototyping processes. We have design thinking processes where we use small initiatives, small ideas, actions, and quickly have quick feedback loops and learning possibilities to adapt. So is that in place? Is there something where we learn, where we can quickly adapt and be flexible in the actions that we take? So this is about participative monitoring. It's not, again, not bringing an expert in to monitor the progress, but let the system itself look at itself and see what is happening and what can we learn. Then another building block is the vital connections. And it's about how do we, I think one of you mentioned it, it's about connecting the different parts, the different elements, and how do we make sure we stay connected with each other, we have good communication within the system, that we also not only within the system, but also outside the system, that we stay in touch with what is happening around us. So how do we keep the connections in life and alive? And I have realized also in our work that it's not only about connecting with each other, connecting with parts of the system, but also connecting with the self and connecting with more, how do you say it? With the self, with the core of existence. So here we bring in, sometimes if we feel it is missing, bring in meditation, silent walks, making sure that it's not only brain work, but we also connect with what's happening in our bodies and use the whole system of ourselves and the whole system of the system that we're working with. The backbone. And that's kind of something you have to have in place when you do a system change process that keeps it going. And it's not the leadership, but it's kind of representation often of the system that you form in a backbone. It can be a steering group, it can be a working group, something that you put in place, and it can also change over time, but you make sure that it's connecting, it stays, and has a kind of core role in the whole process of systems change and system innovation and system transformation. And then we have the last building block, and that is the joker. Because we realize that every situation is unique and every complex situation is unique. So sometimes things emerge during the process that you have to pay attention to. So we cannot say what it is. Sometimes it's really about power dynamics. I had situations where it was about the importance of language, was very sensitive, and we totally overlooked it. And so we had to really address language and the way we were communicating as an extra element of attention. And it can be anything. This is just to make sure that you address and you see every complex situation as unique and see what comes up, what emerges, and how do we address that. So that is what the joker is about. And this is the navigator. And maybe to show you, because I said use all the senses, use also the whole body. What we have developed is a physical version of it. So it's a tangram. And we use it with clients and they play with it. You know, they look at it, they talk about it, they make a kind of figure of it, and because they use their hands and it's kind of an action, something else happens in the conversation. So we chose to make a tangram and let just people play with the different building blocks and see what kind of building blocks emerge as the ones that need attention. So this is something that we have developed that we are really proud of. And so I would like to give you the opportunity now to ask some questions about the Complexity Navigator. You can put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. Okay, I see a raised hand. Koen, you have a question? Can you unmute yourself?
My hand was from half an hour ago.
Oh, okay.
But given the chance, compliments. It's to me, it's I can see a way of thinking I have picked up in other, not as complete as this, but it's at least it's a new way to energize organizations that are taking up challenges that are way too big for a lot of us. So it's that's a compliment. And but I raised my hand just to have a quick. To me, my interest in this gathering is that complexity is too much and too often a form of excuse.
Yes.
And that's what you're having a playful way to address that. And that's I was expecting more of a mind map. That's what I'm looking for. It's the a very simple way to always have your clients thinking about this one thing they're used to be thinking about, but seeing the connection of all the others around it, not necessarily having to address them, but knowing that it's there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Okay, so I probably should stop talking now.
No, but thank you for we use the mind map for one of the building blocks. So sometimes we use the mind map for the sense of urgency. Sometimes we use the mind map to come to a shared ambitions. So we use that as a tool in the different building blocks from our navigator. Yeah.
Can be.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, but for instance, when you're looking at nature, that's what interests me, and I'm going to try to find some information about this project you did in when you're in nature, it's flora, it's fauna, it's resources, it's and we're all talking to an average marketing manager or product developer. He's busy with such a small scope. Not well enough to be more clear, but it's
food for thought.
Goed verstopt. Goed verstopt.
Food for thought, I said. Food for thought.
Oh, good for talks. Yeah, but it's
food
probably...
for thought.
Oh,
food
thanks.
For thinking.
Yeah, it's probably my configuration on my ears, but
yeah, or my English.
Food for thought. A lot of food for thought, and that's what we're not having the chair that doesn't speak right in this gathering. So it's I'm enjoying a lot of more people trying to find complexity. I've done a lot of work for DSM, the early this century, first 10 years. That's what we had to do, find the complexity.
Okay, thank you. Carolina, you had your hand up with a question?
Yes. My open is also a bit, my question is also a bit open, and I would like to hear more about the experience you have by involving the contrast, the opposite voice. I'm also passionate about systems, and we always say we need to involve the opposite sides, the counterpart. We need to put this voice that sounds uncomfortable. My experience with this is the other part, or both parts, feels attacked, and it feels like they are betraying themselves, and it somehow feels fight with identity. So yes, so it's I have this belief: climate change, empower women, abort, like these sensitive topics, right? And then I'm always okay. Let's try with this. Every time that you say we should have the other part, like the opposite side here, it seems like an attack and create this emotion of defensive, this defensive mood, right? And how do you deal with all of this? How do you deal with emotions? How the identity of these parts are not attacked? I'm just who moderates this is a third part. Like I'm just curious about this in the complexity.
Okay.
Navigator.
I try to answer very briefly because there are more questions, and yeah, we have also there a methodology that we use. And one thing we always do before we start a session, very clearly state what a dialogue is, and that the way of talking will be a dialogue where we are curious, where we don't make assumptions or we check our assumptions. So there's a kind of guidelines in how we will have the conversations with each other. And we use deep democracy as an approach to conflict and tension, which is a methodology where you also embrace the conflict. And yeah, there are techniques that we use during, if a process like that, and if it's very sensitive, that we call in these methodologies. And I'm not going to go deeper into that, but it really has helped me enormously to not be afraid of conflict and tension, but to say, okay, there is wisdom in it. There's new knowledge that we can gain from it. And how can I help the group to get that out? So that is a methodology that we use. Okay, just for now, yeah, I cannot go very much deeper, but if you have more questions, you can always approach me afterwards. Laura, you also had a question.
Yeah, maybe can you tell a little bit more about the backbone?
Yeah, what specifically are you looking for?
I think I did not clearly understand it, for what the backbone was. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be a small team. It's a group of people. It's not one person, but it's a group of people who kind of is the backbone of the process. It holds it together and takes responsibility. And I can give an example again that we did a project also in Kenya about women entrepreneurship development. And in the end, there was a group of women who said, we did a workshop and there were some plans that were developed. And we asked, who wants to be the backbone? Who wants to make sure that this is going to happen? Because if we just go away from here and we just have our, you know, all our actions, but who's holding it together? Who will be the backbone? Who will make sure it's going to happen, that there are meetings, that there is exchange, that we have this reinforcing action, that there is adaptive learning? And it cannot be one person. It is often, we invite often the whole system, so the reflection of the system, to be part of the backbone, so that you have connections with the different stakeholders during the process. Yeah, so that's what we mean with the backbone. And it can be a small team. Sometimes it's an organization which is already there, which want to play that role. It depends, but we pay attention to it, because if you just leave the process without a backbone, the chance that it will, you know, spread and not hold together is big. So the backbone is important. You need to pay attention to it. You need to assist the backbone. So often we also help them how to organize themselves, how to, you know, what is the function of the backbone, to describe that role so that it's clear for everyone.
It's like the steering committee, the stuurgroep.
Yeah, it can be a steering committee. Yeah. But sometimes you have a steering committee which says afterwards, yeah, no, we want, you know, we don't want this anymore. And then we ask volunteers who's willing to take this up. So it can be different groups in different stages. But we start with a steering committee or a working group.
Yeah. Sponsor.
Yeah, sponsor. We have two more questions from Jean and from Adiposi. Jean?
Aren't the building blocks actually a mind map or a relationship model or a mental model? You just presented them in a form that we're typically not used to thinking about as a mind map. When you showed me the picture of the pieces of the tools, I mean, I looked at it and I saw a relationship model.
Yeah, it is, because it's all related. Yes, definitely. And that's why you can make a 10-gram and you can make different relationships, different shapes, but it's all connected. Adiposi, you have a question?
Yeah, so what struck out to me was the point about leadership. So we know that we're in a society where there are lots of decentralized systems that are coming up now. So I think the core question I want to ask is like, how do you imagine navigating a decentralized system with view of leadership? And a bit of context to my question is, I was explaining in the subgroup before is that I live in a city that is over, 24 million people. And there's a lot of informality, and the way these informal systems work is that there's no single driver for daily life. There's so many moving parts, and some of these moving parts are not even connected. I would say they're not connected directly, they're indirect connections. So if we have a leadership as one of the building blocks for navigating complexity, I don't know how that would work in a system where there is no, there is a very, I don't know, I think that Cohen talked about organic systems. There's no singular driver for the system. It's very organic like that. Yeah, so that's.
Yeah. Yeah, the question is, maybe it's not important. So it's also a bit the building blocks. You see where is it stuck, or where is the movement stuck, and what needs to be addressed. So sometimes it's not about leadership, and responsive leadership is not that important. But what we have seen in our work is that you need to work with champions, because, and it can be different people in different stages, because maybe it's not one person, but to start the process, you need a champion. And then during the process, you notice, now we need a different leader or a different champion to guide this process. And it often are people with a certain, especially working in Africa, what I do, it needs to be people in a certain authority position. Otherwise, things won't move. I worked a lot in Tanzania, which is very hierarchical. So you need to think about involvement of leadership, people who really kind of champion from a ministry or from another governmental or powerful institution. So it's good to consider that if you get stuck. And in some other situations, it's not that relevant and important because things are moving and the system is moving. So it also depends the situation where you focus on.
We also have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, can you say that?
Also, do you want to move to the practice soon? And then afterwards, I think we have more time for questions as well.
Yeah, let's do a few more questions.
Yeah.
So can you read them?
Yeah. So, for example, Chris was asking, how are the shared ambition and the involvement of all related? So shared ambition of everyone or 80%?
Yeah.
I don't know, Chris, if you want to elaborate or if the question is clear to you, Monique.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
In many situations, you have 20% is pro, and you have a huge part in the middle, and always 20% that is against. So how to define the shared ambition? Is the shared ambition of the 80% or with everyone? And I think it's hard to find a shared ambition if you include everyone.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we work a lot with finding common ground. So instead of looking at so we first in process we diverge, and what is all there? What are the different perspectives? What are the differences? And then we have a kind of chaotic phase, and then we converge. Like, what do we all agree? That what do we all want? And that we call that the common ground. And in our methodology that we use, and we have different ones, but what we strive towards is that in the end, everyone in the room, so all the stakeholders, think about what do we all want? And that will be our common agenda, or that will be the shared ambitions. There are always things that we don't agree on, we can include that and say, what do we need to get agreement? This is also a deep democratic approach. Or we can say, is there a strong objection to move ahead? And this disagreement, you know, you will always have a bit of disagreement. So we have different ways of approaching it, but our experiences, and I just mentioned a methodology that we use a lot in shared ambitions, which is future search, where we go from really future visioning to identifying what are the common things that we see in everyone's dream, everyone's vision, and make that the shared ambition. So my experience is that if you design the process in such a way that everyone is heard and that everyone is acknowledged, respected, and that you look for the future, what we all want, that it's easier to get this shared ambition. Yeah.
And then there was a question from Jere, and I see he also raised his hand now, so maybe you want to explain it yourself.
Yeah, and that's the last question, and then we move on. Yeah?
Jere, you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I thought you were going to read the chat. The question is, the way I understand you, Monique, is that these building blocks are used in the change process. I still think it's more like, it feels more like attention points. I don't see the building. I do see that you need to pay attention to these, all the things, the factors that you've mentioned. So I was interested in the process. How do you start? What is a common start? Do we use the system map as a learning and communication tool? Could you tell us maybe a little bit more about how maybe an average project looks like, how the building blocks fit in? Where do you start? What are some logical steps in the beginning, and maybe also how the system map fits in?
Yeah. Yeah. The system map. Yeah, a lot of questions. Yeah, the system map is a tool that you can use it for different building blocks. For example, involvement of all, or sense of urgency. You can use a system map to the system becomes aware of what's happening and what needs to change or what needs to happen, like this leveraging points, like, okay, this is really something we need to pay attention to. So we use the system map as just a tool for different building blocks. We call it building blocks because we make, it is a tangram. So in tangrams, you have different pieces. We would also call it pieces. And I totally agree with you, it's point of attention as well. So the way we do it, it depends a bit. Sometimes we do it during the process and we sit with the client to say, okay, or with the backbone. And we just say, okay, what's happening? What are the things that are going well? What is in place? And which building blocks are not going so smoothly? Where do we need to pay attention to? So we use it sometimes during the process. Sometimes I've been using it with clients just to assess themselves, like an organization, and let them play with the building blocks and look at it and say, hey, where are we and what are we overlooking and how we want to address that. And sometimes it's with an intake with a client that I bring the navigator and I sit with the client and while talking, trying to get an idea of the situation using these building blocks and creating awareness with the client that often the question they come with is not per se the question that needs to be addressed. So how can you raise that awareness in a playful manner by giving a bit of the opportunity to create a bigger picture of the situation? So yeah, we use it in different ways, different parts, different phases in the process. I hope I've answered your question.
And when you use the system map to get more grip on complexity and how to succeed, shouldn't be all the business blocks also in the system map?
Interesting question. I would like to talk to Hannah about that, because she is the one who is our kind of, the system map expert. So I don't know, Hannah, what you think?
We can think about this together at some point, I think.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Thank you for new food for thought for us. Yeah, and that's also it. We keep on developing it. It's not a fixed thing, and so that's why it's nice. It's a tangram. We can always add pieces or have the joker in a different way.
Maybe one last question. My colleague asks: is leadership also are they having a seat in the backbone?
Yeah, could be. Sometimes not, because sometimes you need the leader, and that's again some experience that I had, that the leaders are very busy and they come as a kind of visitor in the backbone, but they are not in the daily, in the really practical things, but are more of an inspiration and a driver and a motivator for the backbone. Yeah, so it depends a bit.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we would like to give you the opportunity to play a bit with this navigator, and so we have you will go in subgroups, and what we would like you to do. Hannah made a beautiful Miro, and in this Miro you will go to the you can click on the link in the chat. You go to your group number. And you see the navigator, and we have 3 questions for you. So before you go, please, we have the questions that we have for you. Oh, I have them on the presentation. Wait. So what is the current challenge that you see in your environment, and which building block should be paid attention to and why? And before you start working in a group, you have 25 minutes, let's say 20 minutes. Before you start working in the group, you assign the roles of a dialogue leader, a timekeeper, and a reporter to the plenary, because we would like to get some insights back. But you have 20 minutes, not 25 minutes for this. And so the questions are: what is the current challenge you see in your environment? And you just work with one that you come up with as a group. Which building blocks should be paid attention to and why? And the information on the building blocks and the link to the navigator is all on the Miro. So you go to the Miro, click on the link in the chat, and go to your breakout room. And then you see in your group, you have a group worksheet with the navigator, with some post-its, and with links to the building blocks. So you just start playing with it and see how that works for you.
And
so have fun.
When you're in your breakout room, you will see what number breakout room you are. And then you just, on the Miro board, go find the corresponding number space to work there with your group. And yeah, if not all of you are able to access the Miro board, that's okay. If you have at least one person per group that can share their screen, and then you can work on that together. I do recommend to take some notes there. There are already some sticky notes prepared to help you with kind of summarizing your thoughts afterwards. And yeah, if you have any questions or struggles while you're working on the exercise, you can also let us know about that, and then Monique can drop into your breakout room and then help you out with that.
Two more hours.
Yeah. That's a good sign.
Wow. It was fun.
Okay, that's good to hear. It's just, this is an introduction, and normally we have a training that can take 5 days or 2 days, or so we try to squeeze a lot into 2 hours. So it's more to get a taste of it. But I'd like we'd like to hear back from groups. So maybe group number 1, who is the reporter, and in a few minutes, can you share what happens in your group? Some insights that you got in your group. Group number 1. The reporter of group number 1.
Yeah, it's Pia, but I don't know if she's here.
Yes, I am. Sorry, I
no,
just had
don't
to
worry.
had to get my stuff here together. So yeah, so we took the situation. I'm not sure how much you're aware of a village called Lützerath in Germany.
Yeah.
That is facing this devastating situation that it's like taken down for coal mining, and it's just a matter of some days that are going to decide now what is going to happen or not. And to sum it up, we looked at the building blocks at the very beginning, urgency for change, which went a bit into different directions. That there's, of course, the urgency of being less dependent on the Russian gas, which can lead into different directions, and that there are now different narratives confronted, let's say that, and now needs to decide if the change from gas is going to more coal mining or maybe more to renewable energies. And we also came to the point, secondly, about the building block involvement of all, because they are like different stakeholders, groups or people of interest involved, like, of course, the people in the villages, but also future generations and also like current energy consumers, but also like politics and other people. So I think it's more should be more directly be involved, because I think they're not heard. And we also talked about the building block reinforcing actions, especially because things that are decided now will have a very long-term effect that could maybe be even have worse impacts in the future. And also we talked about vital connections, and that there is an importance of because that was something that really spoke to me, what you said before about not only the connections between, like, in a networking way, but also connecting with ourselves. And I thought about that in this point, it's very important to be aware of the connection between us and the nature, and if we're destroying not only a village but also with that decision a planet, that that we are also losing the connection to the nature, and that there are like short-term and long-term effects about those decisions. And so that's to roughly sum it up. I'm not sure how much time we all have, and don't want to take that much time. But if the others from the group also want to add something, or if you think there's something missing, feel free to say something.
I would like to give every group the opportunity in terms of time. So thank you for sharing. I mean, I imagine that you can share much more about your conversation, but I'd like to just hear from different groups how,
sure,
what happened. So I'm sorry to.
No, I try to make it as short as possible. So please go ahead.
Group number 2.
Hi, I'm Sophia, and our group, which was fairly spread out, generally talked about the times of polycrises that we are in. And I think the building block of complexity that was most forward was the urgency for change, or just the lack thereof. There are, presumably the people in this room who can afford to be in here right now facing very low intensity struggle. So the urgency for change in the places that we live is not evenly distributed. There are people facing high intensity struggle who have been, who are and become even more vulnerable. And that leads us to like the involvement of all. We talked about how it can be challenging to include everyone, including talking about future generations and future ancestors, and presuming to know what types of futures they desire. And something else that came up was, the shared ambitions in the story. The SDGs are one that have been used for quite a long time, but they, for instance, are quite hegemonic as they propose one story or a very few stories of progress. That growth, for instance, is something that will benefit everyone. That is not the case. So shared ambitions are shared amongst two. We also talked a little bit about reinforcing actions and that people are still working in silos. And we can see that in many different areas. Okay. And then, yeah, the lack of progress just asks and invites us to consider another type of leadership. I mean, underlying all of this is power and like a lack of conscious use of power. Mm-hmm. And those dynamics continue to play out over and over again. So, you know, are we in a situation of radical reform, or are we beyond reform where we can actually ask different questions and make different mistakes, or are we going to keep making the same mistakes? Yeah, and that's about as far as we got in the short time we had. And
okay, thank you, Sophia. And can we hear from the group number 3, the third group? Who's the reporter? Share some experiences.
Okay. So first of all, we didn't agree on our reporter, but I think I'm taking the role. And that was also interesting to say that we also didn't like fully agree in roles first. We were just discussing about different problems, and sort of the dialogue leader changed during the conversation. That's what I wrote. The whole team, we also worked with heating prices and the gas crisis a bit. I think the first group explained it very well. So I think I'm just going to focus about what happened in the group. So I know this, we were discussing about the heating prices, so I shared my experience here in Austria and how the energy prices and the energy law could be related and how these affect the European Union. So kind of a big difference between the geopolitical, I think the first group explained it well, the geopolitical situation versus the market prices. And one of the questions that a colleague asked is, are you sure, is this an assumption? And then I felt myself, oof, I'm talking about this problem because affect me. I think it's complex, but I'm not sure. So I kind of back up a bit. Is this a real problem? It is a problem for sure. These are the discussions out there, but what are the assumptions, like from the different perspective? And I thought that that was very interesting to mention. So yeah, we also start from the backbone, but for me, it was a bit confusing to start from that part. So, because I felt like I needed to discuss a bit more, okay, what is the problem and how everyone feels about this problem, right? So I think it's also worth mentioning, like this kind of goal or different interest, kind of the agreement before. And then we just, when we start talking about the program, we move to the urgency for change. So this was how it happens in the blog, how we approach the blogs. Mm-hmm. And from the urgency for change, it was a bit easier for me to then split through the other blogs. And yeah, so our results, we talk about this urgency for new renewable sources, as well as how the heating prices are hitting the European households, and the need for energy sources within the European Union. And then we try to, okay, this program is a lot. So what are another person, sorry, I can't remember the name, says, okay, but who is all? What are the players? And then it was a bit, we came up with this, oh, we're so confused, I don't know. And then we kind of find something, and then it was again, oh, what is this problem? These are the players. So it was kind of like this. And I don't know if the other members of the group want to share this experience, but this is how I felt it. And yeah, this is my thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, So also something happens in the group when you are working with the navigator, which is interesting. Then the fourth group. What happened in your group? Want to report back?
I'm doing this because I decided not to put Miguel on the spot. But, each one of the people in the group sort of had a different problem that they were wrestling with, so we sort of boiled it down to something that seemed consistent across all of us, which was evolving collective understanding, which is what the whole thing is about anyway. And then we sort of talked about how does it make sense to work through the pieces of the puzzle, sort of what you presented in terms of understanding the context and the urgency for change. About, you don't decide to have a meeting in the middle of a burning theater, all right? It's time for somebody to yell fire, pull the fire exchange, and help everybody else get out. But your point about if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, you go with everyone. So we talked about the urgency and about getting people on board. And we also talked about, the 20, 60, 20% distribution of people and figuring out who the 20% are that are excited and on board about the change, and the 60% that are not opposed to it, and the 20% that you want to convince to go work somewhere else. And so that, involvement of all was not, we had a sort of I have a different perspective on what all means, okay? Because you can't afford in many instances to get weighted down in terms of, if the company's about to go out of business in 6 months, if we don't change, I can't spend time nursemaiding this 20% of the organization that's holding us back. I mean, it's go somewhere else, please. And we'll help you find work for our competition. So we spend our time working through the sequence of the pieces to the puzzle and how it makes sense to do them in slightly different orders for different contexts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to understand what the situation is, and you have to understand the participants and where they are, and how to sort of facilitate that collective understanding. It's sort of, it's a dance, okay? So that's, so the point that I thought to make and forgot was to quote Lao Tzu, to know and not to act is not to know. So once you get to a collective understanding of this is what makes sense, then you're in alignment, like Sengi talks about in the fifth discipline, and you become a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Fifth group. In a few minutes, can you share?
Yeah, this is Gül as reporter. We kind of actually not so clear or on the challenge, but we came up with 3 challenges that we found. Digital service creation, that is considering the planet and the people, and education and bringing systems thinking to education, and involvement of critical stakeholders in different projects. So we had these 3 topics, challenges we discussed. And in terms of building blocks, that because the main thing I think popped out is how to involve people that are missing, but relevant critical stakeholders who don't want to be involved. And so we chose involvement of all and adaptive learning as a building block.
Okay, thank you. The last group?
So yeah, that would be group 6.
Yeah.
So for us, we didn't really choose to focus on a problem or a challenge. We focused on a trend sort of that is happening right now in Netherlands, and we tried to observe this trend using this building block. And what is this trend? It is the fact, it's this decentralized system of food mobility that is run by volunteers. And we realized that this trend or this movement does not have a central operator. So we asked the question, what elements of this navigator or this guide can we use to help scale up the system to have it replicate itself in other cities? And so instead of looking at how this system reflects these elements or building blocks of the navigator, we're looking at what is missing. What are the gaps? And one gap that we saw that is in this system is the lack of a backbone. Another gap that we saw was that the lack of a backbone for us meant that it requires deliberate collaboration between the stakeholders, the actors. With regard to the element of reinforcing actions, there is a general, desire for this, but there is no motivation. So the question of why are we replicating this in other cities, in other parts of the continent, Europe? How do you manage this system? And this is the question regarding responsive leadership, so that it doesn't spiral out of control. It does not lead to supply and demand problems later on. And this is the summary. It's quite alien to me, but thankful to Dirk and Justin, I understood it a bit.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we've come to an end. As I said, there's so much more to ask and to explain and to share and to learn. But yeah, we only have 2 hours and it's just a short introduction, but I'm happy to hear that you've played with it and keep on playing with it. I mean, you have it now to your in your toolbox, and I would like to invite you just to start using it and discussing it with people, and even from your own organization. Let's just look at our own organization using these building blocks and see what do we think of ourselves. Yeah, and I also looked in the chat in the meantime, and I saw a question about someone who asked, what are the different methodologies that you use per building block? So we have something work in progress, which we would like to share with you afterwards. I will finish it, and then Hannah will share that with you as a document that you can see, hey, if we want to pay attention to shared ambitions, what are methodologies that you could use? And there you also see where systems mapping will come in. So that's the last thing that from our side. And for now, I would like to ask everyone to write a word in the chat on how you have experienced this introduction, workshop or meeting, session, whatever. In 1 word or 2 words in the chat, please, as a checkout.
And while you're working on that, I also want to mention we have soon another event coming up also together with Perspectivity, where they will be sharing a specific case that they were working on using a method called future search, which also, they will mention a little bit how it relates back to certain aspects of the navigator. So once you're all done with your 1 words, I will also share the link to that in the chat. And then also, if you have enjoyed coming together in this group of like-minded people, learning together, sharing your insights, then we as the Amsterdam Hub at the end of February will be facilitating a 6-week learning lab. So if that's something that you're interested in, I will also share the link for that. So it's 6 weeks of going through the process of, okay, how can we approach a systems change process? We will be working with a specific challenge and practicing with that together. So okay, I'll share.
Yeah, so a link to the next event, the future search case study or case workshop. Also 2-hour session on the 6th, no, on the, I don't know which date, but. And of course, if there's anything, you can approach me or Hannah afterwards with questions, or if you want more information about something. And then I would like to now close the session and thank you all for being here, showing up, learning, exchanging, and participating. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening.